Post Hurricane Sandy, we had a lot of bad actors coming in, collecting a lot of money for doing very little work, but actually causing harm. Physically removing the source is where it's at. Covering it up by chemicals and encapsulants is not allowed. Mold is everywhere, but it's the mold growth due to moisture or water intrusion. That's what we got to take out and get out of the premises.
Today, I'm thrilled to welcome two incredible experts from the IICRC. First, we have Mark Drozdov, an environmental health and safety expert with over 30 years of industry experience. Mark has worked on some of the most significant environmental projects worldwide, co-founding a company that was later acquired by the British Standards Institution, known as BSI. His expertise spans hazard identification, remediation, and sustainable practices, and I'm eager to explore the valuable insights he has on the standards that guide our industry. Joining Mark is Holly Kimber, a dedicated member of the IICRC team since 2016 and currently serving as their chief of staff. Holly has been instrumental in advancing globally recognized standards and certifications in the inspection, cleaning, and restoration industries. Her commitment to excellence has helped drive IICRC's mission forward, and I can't wait to hear her perspective on the important work being done in this space. So, Mark and Holly, so glad to have you here. Welcome to the summit.
Pleasure to be here.
Hey there, sorry to jump in here, but really important. At the end of this video, there's a link that gives you access to a bonus package we put together that has all sorts of great resources. Pro-level notes, audio downloads, a fast start guide, as well as some additional resources from our speakers. You will not want to miss out on that. You can also find the link in the description below or at gotmoldsummit.com. So go claim yours today. Now back to the interview. So I guess since we're doing this is an unusual format, typically it's one-on-one. And so, this is an experiment in many ways. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to throw some questions out and then you guys can just figure out who's most appropriate for the answers. For starters, what's the IICRC for those, the uninitiated, for the consumer mostly? And how did it come to be the organization that oversees the mold and water damage industry standards?
You want me to answer that one, Mark?
Absolutely.
All right. The IICRC, also known as the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, was established in 1972 by Ed York. It has been the leading in the industry for training and professional certification for industry professionals across all three divisions, inspection, cleaning, and restoration, since that time.
And what was it that really got the standards going? And at what point did the organization go from a membership organization where there were some trainings to actually establishing standards and then sort of really being the governing body?
The IICRC has been ANSI accredited as a standards developer since September of 2005. The inaugural ANSI accredited standard was the S100, which is the professional cleaning of textile floor coverings or carpet cleaning.
Cool. So since 2001, there's been a move towards codifying best practices with regards to the cleaning, restoration, and inspection industry. When it comes down to the actual mold and water damage section, actually, let me back up. What is ANSI?
ANSI is the American National Standards Institute. And
why is that important?
It is the federal level of recognition for standards of practice.
Got it. So above IICRC essentially is an organization that helps to make sure that those standards are properly documented. Please correct me if I'm misspeaking anywhere. That they're properly documented and that they uphold best practices. Is that a fair assessment?
That in addition to having a very regulated process, documentation as well as procedural requirements for consensus-based standards, yes.
Got it. Well, of course, that doesn't sound very consumer-friendly, right? All these things are these documents that are produced, whether it's the S100 all the way up to what's the current S sequence being worked on? Where are we up to now?
S900.
S900. These are dense documents. These are definitely not, Sunday afternoon leisure reading. I've got one of them here, and I got another one here. And so the ones that we're talking about today are the S500 water damage standard and the S520 mold remediation standard. Can we talk about how they differ in terms of addressing water damage versus mold?
You want me to answer that one, Mark? You're supposed to be helping me, though. So the S500 describes specifically the procedures to be followed and the precautions to be taken when performing water damage restoration in residential, commercial, and institutional buildings, and the systems and the personal property contained within those structures. Where the S520 describes the procedures to be followed and the precautions to take when performing mold remediation in those same structures.
And so I guess the question for the consumer is, how do they dovetail into each other? And where is the line drawn? Because most people listening to this will say, well, isn't most mold from water damage? And where do we draw the line? What is the distinction there?
Mm-hmm. So while the S500 covers water damage restoration and recognizes the problem of microbial growth associated with the water damage, it's not intended to be a specific guide on the subject of mold remediation. The presence of any mold in a water damage project requires the expertise of a mold remediator prior to drying. So the S500 and the 520 cross-reference each other for more information in the specific situations.
Got it. Cool. Okay. So what we're talking about here are really two completely different procedures for handling oftentimes the same circumstances, but across the timeline of the event, right? So the S500 being, hey, listen, if we can get to this quickly and we can mitigate the damages, then we're operating underneath the S500. If too much time goes by, which is how long, Mark?
It could be 48 to 72 hours. And just to elaborate on this point, water damage events various in its nature and size. And oftentimes, as you mentioned, Jason, it will become a mold situation after water damage. But if we can get to it quickly and effectively and dry the spaces out, we can alleviate and prevent the mold microbial growth. And that's where the S500 has been very instrumental in the industry. It's the Bible of the industry. And, every reputable company must, at minimum, know how to effectively and correctly dry out a property. When things go a different way, now we are in the mold microbial growth situation, and remediation must take place. And that's where the S520 comes in. And that has become the Bible for the industry. And thanks to IICRC, it is the most comprehensive, the most accepted standard. And as Holly mentioned, it's ANSI accredited process that makes the standard solid and representative of where the state-of-the-art practices should be, where the industry is practicing it. I personally came across it about 10 years ago. And here in New York, where I'm from, that's Brooklyn Bridge behind me, we had a state regulation mandating that if you are going to be doing mold work of any sorts, you must be licensed. So the mold law came about 10 years ago here in New York State, and it shook up, everybody doing that work. And we started, looking for methods of compliance. And we quickly realized the law was based on three things. it was the EPA, it was the New York City Department of Health mold procedure that is widely accepted nationwide. And the third thing was IICRC. And back then, for me, that was a very unfamiliar acronym. And I've been in the industry, as you mentioned, over 30 years, and I've done a lot of remediation work, including, tomorrow's 9/11 and working in Ground Zero right downtown from where I live. We were down there addressing the contaminants of concern of various levels, mold included. And what I started looking into is, what is this IICRC, and why would New York State, after doing extensive research, really based its law on these three sources of information? And I realized that IIRC has done tremendous amount of groundwork to make the standard that is representative of what it should be, how the remediators must act, what procedures should be followed. And I not only learned about it, I joined the organization. That's why I'm proudly wearing their logo, and joined was voted in to be on board of directors. And I am currently serving a number of standard developments. Mold assessment is one of them, S530. The S410, the infection control standard, is actually something that I need to run to after this interview, because we are wrapping up that standard. It's our last meeting, so it's very, very important. We've been working on it for 2 years. And as Holly mentioned, what is a standard? It's the consensus of various stakeholders in that industry. And it's everybody from the contractor, consumer, insurance company, chemical manufacturer, whoever it may be. And it's got to be balanced. And consensus means an agreement, right? And we all have to agree, and that's the only time and when the standard is published.
And that's tricky, getting anybody, any group of industry professionals to agree on a document, let alone one idea. So that means a lot, right? So the fact that there's been this group of experienced professionals that got together and said, "Hey, we got to standardize this stuff, and here are the things we agree to." And I think that's really important for people to hear, because this is not arbitrary stuff. This is not something that somebody cooked up yesterday in their basement, just thinking we got to, start selling certifications and trainings. I think that's important, because there are organizations like that are just selling certifications, and IICRC is not one of those. But you bring up licensing and you bring up the standards in the same breath, and it's interesting to me, because I've noticed that in states where standards, where licensing has been enacted, there's very little in terms of requirements for any sort of prereqs, and certainly for continuing education or for additional certifications in the states that I'm thinking of. And so in many ways, I've seen the licensing actually lower the bar amongst the professionals when contrasted against the certified professionals that are out there. Now, that's just one man's opinion, one man's perspective. Do you want to speak to that, Mark?
Yeah. Speaking about the certification process here in New York State, and I'm very intimate with it, because I had to develop my own training manual. I had to go in front of the panel of New York State Department of Health, New York State Department of Labor, prove that the information provided in the manual is valid and substantiated. And so as a trainer, when I teach my students, they're getting a lot of information. So hopefully, that kind of raises the bar, right? People get educated. And then we need to renew our certification periodically. So from the standpoint which you mentioned, continuing education, that is occurring for the renewal requirement. There is no prerequisite to become a certified mold remediator or certified mold assessor. That is true. And what I always say is that certification and what you mentioned, the government licensing, that's the floor. That's where you, the minimum should start from. Obviously, we have a term at IICRC standards called, the Environmental Indoor Professional, IEP. Well, there are different levels of IEPs. Could go to a PhD or a technician in the field collecting samples. What consumers should be aware is what is it you need, who you're getting for it, and you don't want to pay a PhD if you just need a technician. But if you have a complicated situation, you may want to rethink the technician's input to it.
Fair enough. So S500, very important for water damage companies, for companies that are the first to arrive, right? But it's also really important for the remediation contractors to be up to speed on that too, so that they know where the line is drawn. They know when there's a water damage issue that may not need quite as much vigilance versus something that may have aged a bit and we might be over the 72-hour mark. So this is S500 and S520 is relevant to the industry as a whole. But the consumer doesn't really hear much about the S500. If anything, they hear mostly about the S520. So I like to educate people about the S500 because, of course, they have this mitigation is the key element, right? If we can prevent mold, then we've actually saved a lot of heartache and a lot of money. What is it about the S500 in a nutshell that the consumer needs to know about? What are the protective mechanisms within the S500, Mark, that they should be aware of?
Well, what I would say is the contractor you hire is who you're relying upon to do the job and do it right? And you want that contractor follow the standard, right? Standard that is accepted and mandated by the industry, and follow it to the point where the end result will be a good one for you, the consumer. So from the consumer standpoint, I think you really want to know, is the company certified? Who are they certified by? And really have an understanding that if they are an IICRC registered company, they have to go through a process of getting their people trained, to various, we have a master level, to proud of our masters in the field because they have years of experience. They have multiple licenses and certifications to get to be that, to be the master. So what company you hire, they should be the ones versed in the S500 and S520 standards.
Fair enough. So I guess we'll get to later how to choose a contractor, and some advice or tips you may have around that. But since we're still on the standards, give me some clarity on how the S520, the mold remediation standard, can help the consumer better understand the importance of proper mold removal versus the common misconception of killing mold. In other words, please explain why the standard advises against the use of antimicrobials, fogs, encapsulants, which are often promoted by some contractors as effective solutions. Hey there, sorry to jump in here, but really important. At the end of this video, there's a link that gives you access to a bonus package we put together that has all sorts of great resources. Pro level notes, audio downloads, a fast start guide, as well as some additional resources from our speakers. You will not want to miss out on that. You can also find the link in the description below or at gotmoldsummit.com. So go claim yours today. Now back to the interview.
Very good question, Jason. And if we look back in the history of the New York State mold law, the reason it came about is just exactly that. Post Hurricane Sandy, we had a lot of bad actors coming in, collecting a lot of money for doing very little work, or sometimes not doing the remediation work, but actually causing harm by introducing, tons of chemicals into premises without really removing the mold and the mold affected surfaces. And that's when New York State came in, stepped in, and said, oh, we have to stop that. And New York State, just like IICRC standards, does not recommend the use of biocides or microbial chemical of any sorts. It's the getting the affected surfaces out, cleaning up, detergent, simple detergent could do the job. And, physically removing the source is where it's at. Covering it up by chemicals, encapsulants, or whatever you want to call it, is not allowed. Also keep in mind that, we're all consumers at the end of the day. If I'm sitting in my home and I'm smelling the chlorine that the contractor just poured on my wall to kill the mold, as a consumer, I probably want to look it up and see exactly, what that means, how that was, construed, and realize that it's not factual. And mold growth is exactly that. It needs to be removed when it happens. Mold is everywhere, but it's the mold growth due to moisture or water intrusion that occurs. That's what we got to take out and get out of the premises.
And how do the standards emphasize the importance of addressing the underlying water issue rather than just removing the mold?
Well, Holly has a very interesting story to tell you.
Yes, indeed. Do tell, Holly.
Okay. A little bit in January of this year, I was getting ready to call it a day, laying in my bed, and I started hearing a dripping noise, and I had water coming in from the ceiling from the unit above me. I did my due diligence to find its source, make contact with the tenants and also the property owner above me. I immediately called out a trusted IICRC-certified firm to cut open the walls. A plumber came, guaranteed that the water source had been addressed and resolved. They brought in the drying equipment and cut open the ceilings, part of the walls in my master bedroom closet, but indicated to me that we didn't need to open the bathroom walls. After much discussion and debate, I said, okay, let's try and dry it. After about 4 days of the drying equipment in place in the affected areas of my home, it was reading dry on the moisture meter in both the bathroom and in the closet space. I requested that mold testing be done. The certified firm gave me advance notice that it may or may not be covered by my insurance. But for my own peace of mind and well-being, I wanted to make sure that there was nothing to be concerned about before we closed the walls up. Well, when the environmentalists came to my house about 12 or 14 hours later, the area that I was concerned about in the bathroom was already reading 86 on a moisture meter. And he ceased any sampling setup or any further actions, contacted the restoration company, and they came back, brought their equipment back, and they opened up the ceiling and a piece of the wall where the moisture readings were back way above the dry standard. At that time, when they opened the ceiling, the drywall that they removed from both the wall and the ceiling was covered in mold, microbial growth. And once they expanded even further, we discovered that the entire subfloor of the unit above me was completely contaminated and needed to be removed and replaced. This was all from a toilet gasket leaking in the unit above me. Very easily could have been avoided, but it got to that point and had been leaking for an undetermined amount of time, thus resulting in that microbial growth in our lovely hot Las Vegas weather.
Yummy. Yep. So many questions. Number one, every consumer, every person listening to this is going to say, so did insurance cover it?
After some push back and forth, yes. My insurance ended up covering it, but only because I had an additional rider on my policy that covered damage to my property from an adjacent unit, as well as a separate mold policy that I had purchased just out of safety and security.
Well, and please, because you're in the know, this is a word to the wise for anyone listening to this. Mold is generally not covered by insurance above $5,000 or $10,000, and especially not for slow leaks. Right, sudden and accidental losses are generally the first threshold, essentially. So you were a combination of lucky and prepared, in a way, right? So, and by the way, sorry.
My recommendation to every homeowner is actually read your policy. Ask your insurance agents about scenarios such as what I just described, because most people don't know if they need a separate flood policy, if you need a separate third-party liability coverage rider on your homeowner's insurance. So if you don't know what your insurance has and covers, call your agent and ask.
Sound advice. And do you recommend possibly having people consider getting that additional rider? Is that something that you would suggest?
I live in a condominium. It's 2 stories, so I'm touched by 3 other units that we share either walls or the ceiling as their floor above me. So definitely, if you're in a shared space where you have like walls, townhouses, condominiums, apartments is a totally different story as far as coverage for renters. But I definitely recommend you have that additional rider. What it does is if the loss is not due to a fault of your own, most generally in my situation, the HOA's insurance is liable. However, if it comes from the interior and your neighbor up above or to the side does not have insurance, as was the case in my situation, you would just be stuck trying to battle it out in a civil suit or counting on the property owner, the other property owner, to pay for all of the damage to your property and your personal belongings. So that risk, in my mind, is not worth any amount that it would cost you in increased premiums just to have that security.
Yep. Understood. Now, in terms of the way it almost went versus the way it did go, what was it about was there a procedure that was not followed that would have had the contractor continue to go opening walls? Was there something that was overlooked that would have prevented them from finding the rest of the mold?
There wasn't any inappropriate actions or lack of action taken by the restoration company. It's pretty standard of practice, depending upon the level of moisture, the moisture readings, whether or not they can, just drill a hole into the wall to allow the air to move through, or if they don't need to open it at all. If the majority of the water and the moisture readings are to one side of the affected area, they can successfully dry, and they did. But had I not asked for the environmentalist to come out and do the mold sampling, we would have closed up the walls, and it would have just started leaking through the ceiling again.
Which is a word to the wise. A lot of times during these insurance jobs, a lot of times these water damage events, people skip over testing. They skip over the actual data collection. They rely purely on moisture readings and visual observations and humidity readings and things like that. So probably wise to consider doing some sampling during these kinds of procedures, just to make sure that you've gotten it all. So let's ask this. So when it comes down to skipping over, just moving over to sort of concerns that the consumer doesn't even know they have. For example, conflicts of interest. This is a big deal, right? And it's really convenient to hire a one-stop shop, right? It's so convenient. It's so easy. And it happens in so many industries. Auto mechanics, right? Bring your car to an auto mechanic. She does the assessment and does the repairs. No problem. We trust people to do that. Why is that an issue in our industry? What are the conflicts of interest that can arise, and what can consumers do to avoid it?
Well, if I may answer that, if we have a trusted, brother-in-law who's a contractor and a knowledgeable professional, perhaps, we can trust Joe to get this done from A to Z effectively, thoroughly, as in Holly's case, really go and look around, and as opposed to, in and out and collect the fee. So that's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum, contractors that are really milking the job. And this is what we experienced post Hurricane Sandy. People were like in there day in, day out, and just, collecting the fees without much justification. So that's where the third party comes in. You really need a trusted party that you can rely on. And perhaps that brother-in-law Joe could be the trusted party, but make sure that that person, that entity is certified and knowledgeable and licensed in that field. So if you have, as in New York State, for example, an assessor, and their job is to assess, their job is to find out, what is the quantity of mold to be remediated, what is the exact scope of work, how it's to be achieved, what is the approximate estimate cost, duration, what is the work plan, and then bring several contractors to bid on it. All of a sudden, you as a consumer feel a lot more comfortable that, somebody's watching after you, and the scope of work is that there's no conflict of interest. That scope of work is being executed by the good contractor, certified good contractor, and then at the end, somebody's going to go and check, as in Holly's example, was it completed?
Yeah, I often tell people that inspectors are paid for their time and advice, and contractors are paid by the pound. And so, you want someone who's designing the project to be paid for their time and advice, not paid by the pound.
And,
right?
In the industry, we hear similar kind of analogies. Contractors get paid to work quickly. Whereas the consultants get paid to work slowly. How do you reconcile those two? That's the art that we deal with daily.
No doubt about it. So how can consumers ensure that the professionals they hire are adhering to the standards, especially when the guidelines are not publicly accessible?
Once again, is your contractor you hiring certified? who are they certified by, who is doing that independent third-party assessment for you, and at the end of the job, who you're going to rely upon to certify that it's clean.
Well, so I guess my question is a little more pointed. When it comes to certifications, there are lots of companies that say IICRC certified, and then the crew shows up and they may have people certified there, but not everybody is necessarily certified. So does it behoove the consumer to ask deeper questions about whether the staff actually that will be on site holds those certifications? Because in my experience, just the firm being certified isn't quite enough.
So my recommendation to the average consumer who's in this type of situation where they need a mold professional to come in and do it, take care of the source, the water, all the way to the end, to a restored, clean environment, is ask questions. The IICRC specifically and our certifications can all be verified by phone or by our live chat feature. We can tell you, is this person certified in water damage restoration? Yes or no. If they took the course and they're showing in the system as out of compliance with continuing education or renewal requirements, the answer will be no. We're not going to communicate to a consumer inquiring that, oh, the guy used to be. It's a yes or no situation, because it's our brand and our guarantee to the industry and the consumer to offer accurate and current information. The number one thing that I would recommend to a consumer dealing with this situation is ask the questions. Ask to see their certifications. IICRC specifically offers a pocket card, just like a credit card that fits in their wallet, that shows each individual's certifications that they've obtained and their current status. It has their IICRC registration ID number and the expiration date for the listed certifications. If you want to know if the company is certified, that too can be verified on the IICRC's website using the Locate a Professional tool. Master level designation holders also can be found there. Our inspectors can be found on that same search tool. You can search by city, state, zip code. It's very easy to use. And then alternatively, you can always call or use the live chat feature to speak with someone here at the Global Resource Center to confirm a company or individual certifications.
Cool. Okay. Thank you for that. So a lot of focus right now is on mycotoxins, almost to the exclusion of any other mold-related compound. And so, and many of the doctors and healthcare providers are myopically focused on mycotoxins as well. So can you clarify the difference between the mycotoxins and the mold and explain why the standards focus on water damage and mold remediation rather than directly addressing mycotoxins?
Well, you're touching upon a controversial area where some bad actors kind of extrapolating some terminology and trying to attach it to an industry. And what we've been hearing, from time to time, mold is gold, and they're searching for that gold, digging for that gold. And, mycotoxins, if you look at the WHO studies and other published information on mycotoxins, it is strictly about the foods and the crops that it originated from.
Hey there, sorry to jump in here, but really important. At the end of this video, there's a link that gives you access to a bonus package we put together that has all sorts of great resources. Pro-level notes, audio downloads, a fast start guide, as well as some additional resources from our speakers. You will not want to miss out on that. You can also find the link in the description below or at gotmoldsummit.com. So go claim yours today. Now back to the interview.
Could it happen in your residence? I'd like to see the proof of that. But really, if you have a mold situation like a leaking bathroom from above, or, I remember our first house we built in Brooklyn, New York, my wife and I, we had this great idea of putting washer and dryer on the third floor. The day before we moved, guess what? It flooded. And we had water everywhere.
Oh, boy.
And yeah, we had to do some serious remediation. And, it's a story that probably requires a book for a young couple, that we had to deal with. The fact is, if you have moisture, water intrusion into your living occupied spaces, you got to deal with it. You got to dry it out. You got to remove it. If it's moldy, get it out. Now, if you remove the sources, that's really where the job is completed. It's got to be cleaned up. It's got to be done properly without contaminating the rest of the house, the rest of the residences, or the workers, getting overexposed to mold spores. Now, are there some hypersensitive individuals out there? Of course they are. And, we need to deal with that differently and really focus on the individuals. The medical professionals have to be involved. And we need to work as a team to make sure that the work that is paid for the right things and achieves the right results. Can you take that and put it across the board? Absolutely not.
So there's a few things I'd like to unpack there. So first of all, this is a little bit of a teaser for another interview with Dr. David Krause, that's also involved in this summit. And Dr. Krause got his PhD based on a thesis he wrote about microbial growth on building materials. And his conclusion was that there's not enough nutrition to support the very expensive metabolic processes necessary to produce mycotoxins in any significant amounts. And furthermore, a number of other experts that I've interviewed for the summit will say that they just don't become airborne in sufficient quantities, even in environments where there might be mycotoxins, where there may be enough nutrition. So just in terms of, the tagline of the summit is clearing the air on mold and mycotoxins. So this is it's a top of mind thing for so many people. People almost can't say mold without mycotoxins in the same sentence. But the reality is that it is the tail, not the tiger. And when we're talking about the tiger is dampness, right? The tiger is the mold itself. We're talking about the mycotoxins are way out here and may or may not be relevant. So, but in that same breath, there are the hypersensitive population. This seems to be a growing population, whether it's because of awareness or because of shifts in the public health, who knows? But there are a lot of healthcare providers that have created a focus. They call themselves mold literate doctors, there's mold literate lawyers. So for healthcare providers who are serving this hypersensitive population, what can the IICRC standards do to ensure that the patients are receiving safe and effective mold remediation services?
Our standards are very clear. Our standards been written, again, by consensus bodies, meaning people from all walks in the industry. They work at it daily. These are professionals with different interests, by the way. And that's the beauty of the consensus standards, because people with different interests at the end have to agree, this is okay to be published. And then it goes through a very extensive peer review in the rest of the world. And all the comments have to be addressed. Everything has to be addressed. And it's not in our standards. Is there some one-off cases that require some, focusing onto with some medical professionals, perhaps, and that's not the what the industry should be kind of swayed to for everybody to be, and that increases costs. It takes an eye off the ball, and all of a sudden, the work that you really hired people for to achieve is growing into not what you should be spending money on. We live in the real world where mold is present everywhere. Consumers really need to read the fact sheets published by OSHA, EPA, various departments of health. Read, the information that we've published, white papers on the subject. The fact of the matter is, it's the confused mind at times that perhaps goes into wrong direction. So we want to make sure that work is done per the standard. Rely on the standard.
Yes. No, and the standard very clearly defines the purpose of remediation as restoring a property to a normal condition, which is in quotes. And so normal being very specific to the type of property, the location of the property, its use case, things like that, right? So, a warehouse, normal is going to be different for a warehouse than it will be for a nursery school or for a high-rise apartment in New York City. And so when we're talking about catering to the hypersensitive or the highly sensitive, then we're not talking about normal. We're talking about a much higher level than normal, or a much cleaner level than normal, which I think is what you're saying, correct? So we're talking about expensive prospect to begin with remediation, and then making it, having that bar be set so much higher would make the entire industry cost prohibitive. Is that a fair assessment? Is that what you're saying? So what advice do you have for mold service professionals on how they can best implement the S500 and S520s in their work to improve transparency? And I'm not saying just the work itself, but in terms of creating awareness around this, in terms of the way they communicate. Do you have anything to speak to on that?
Well, what I would say to the professionals out there, do the job right consistently. That's how the reputations are built, and you will make the money doing the right things. Don't chase something, don't chase mold as gold, but do the job, do it professionally, and you'll be amazed how all of a sudden everybody would want to hire you. Unfortunately, there are a lot of bad actors out there, and the consumers are not always educated, and they tend to lean towards the shiniest objects or the loudest speakers.
True. Or whoever's marketing the best. Yeah. And listen, everyone's already in a state of fear. So if you speak their language, if you use fear-based language and they're already afraid, boy, those people tend to come in droves. So it's a shame. So sorry.
Yeah. I wanted to, you triggered something. We're in a very sensitive industry because we're coming into people's homes and, they have a concern. They not always as smart as Holly is, to know, what's what. Is the surface still wet? Maybe, there's more remediation that's needed or less. And we are dealing with, people in their homes, and they want to feel comfortable. They want to feel comfortable with the work you're doing, with the things they're hearing. And at the end of the day, and I've seen this time and time again, they may go for this costly remediation without any logic whatsoever, only because it made them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had colleagues and friends and neighbors that I've worked with through mold issues, and I've seen, they kind of believe I would come in and do it as a friend without compensation, saying you don't need this, you just need that, and they're like, well, you know what, we want to better be safe than sorry, and that unfortunately is a driving force out there.
Yeah, I agree. People will go to great pains for peace of mind, even beyond the logic. If this is a very, very emotional subject.
It is an emotional subject, yes.
Yeah, we can apply all the logic and standards and best practices and structure and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, this strikes at the heart of people's greatest fears, right? It's the health and livability and salability of their home. And, parents who have kids, gosh, the rat's nest of emotions there about the guilt and, it's really tough. I mean, there's just, and if you don't know anything about this and even people in the industry disagree, right? So it's a very, very difficult space. So what advice do you have for homeowners, aside from what you just outlined, that are facing a water damage or mold issue?
Don't try and fix it yourself, because oftentimes going in without appropriate knowledge and skills, you can exacerbate the situation and cause it to worsen instead of be resolved. If you don't know if your water loss constitutes a restoration company coming in to dry out the structure or affected materials, call one and have them come take a look. Better safe than sorry. The mold in my ceiling from the unit above me, that was mortifying. To go in and look up and it was just, the subfloor was rotting and covered in microbial growth. It's easier to fix it from the start rather than wait until it's gotten, significantly worse in condition. And no one's going to judge you or be like, man, this crazy lady, her toilet overflowed. Use common sense, but also seek assistance from qualified professionals that are the experts and know what should be done.
That is sound advice. So how can people learn more about IICRC? How do they find a professional? And how can they learn more about the work you guys do?
The IICRC Global Resource Center is located in Las Vegas, Nevada. So if you're ever on vacation and you want to come check out and see what goes on at the IICRC, we're just a few blocks away from the Strip. The IICRC has a very elaborate website with many resources available. You can access the standards through www.iicrc.org. There are free resources as well. And then to locate a qualified certified company or technician, you can use the Locate a Pro tool, which is found right on the very front page of our homepage.
Perfect. And Mark, is this full-time? Is this what you're doing now that you sold your company? Is IICRC your main focus?
I serve on the board of directors, and as I mentioned, I'm on a number of committees and standard development. I chair a number of initiatives, but no, I have a day job.
Oh, do you?
I have a day job. I work for an engineering firm, and I had their environmental health and safety and sustainability division, where we do a lot of municipal work, and some very good work, as well as teaching on the subject at Rutgers University School of Public Health, Cooper Union, and Stevens Institute of Technology. So, as my wife says, I failed at retirement. So, I enjoy what I do. I have a lot of credentials, initials after my name. I'm proud of it. And if I can serve as a subject matter expert, which I often do, I enjoy the process.
So if anyone's interested in learning more about you, where would people find you?
LinkedIn would be the best.
Perfect.
It's very easy to locate me, Mark Drozdov.
Excellent. All right. I think we did it. Hey, before you go, in case you haven't done it already, go to gotmoldsummit.com to claim your bonus package today. It's filled with all sorts of great stuff. Audio downloads, pro-level notes, fast start guide, and some additional gifts from our speakers, all absolutely free, so you won't want to miss out on that. Again, go to gotmoldsummit.com to claim your bonus package. You can also find the link in the description below.